when I looked at a variety of different companies where I've worked in, they usually, I start spotting some anti-patterns in the code. And the more you do them, the more you see starts to collect sort of a list of things that people do not optimal. And then I have those lists, so I'm going to share it with you today. The list is pretty long. I'm going to stick to like the most common ones, and it really depends on you. So I'd like to keep it a little bit more workshop-like and interactive, where you can actually ask me questions, and we can move to more advanced topics as we go. Just for you to know, some of those topics are sort of controversial. It's because you don't see the gain, or you don't see. So think about it this way: when you have a design pattern, that design pattern is meant to help you code, help you maintain your code, and allow you to scale your code base. An anti-pattern is opposite of that. This is something that with scale will actually harm your code base. So actually, it's also pretty funny because a lot of design patterns become anti-patterns, like singleton usually is one of those considered. So generally think about it when you look. So it's really hard for me to show you an
Excuse me, Greg.
Yes.
Sorry. Are you sharing your screen?
No, actually, I'm just talking for now, and then I'm gonna move.
Oh, okay.
Okay, no worries. That's
no problem.
tech in sync.
Yeah.
So
it's okay.
Sure. So it's really hard to show anti-pattern how it actually harms you without having a big code base. And usually in a session like this, it's pretty small code base, right? So it's really important that you just trust me on this one, and it's just an experience. Okay, let's just get into it. Let me show you some of these anti-patterns. Okay, I have to do like this. Just a second. All right, now I'm sharing. So let's get a code on screen. So let's just imagine. Maybe let's close all these things. Okay, so let's start with the first things first. So one of the very most, and I think like the most important principle when you write an Angular app is reactive programming. So when you code something in Angular and you have to learn things like RxJS, it's pretty steep curve of learning process. It's because it's quite hard. To be honest, RxJS is one of those things that actually sort of like, it got me thinking a lot, and it took me time to actually understand it. And the reason why it's so hard, one of the reasons is because it's changed the paradigm of the programming. It's leaning towards the functional programming, not the object-oriented. So you have the pipeable operators and stuff like this. But generally, there is also one more thing called subscription. So let's have a look. Let's build a component real quick. So what I can do is to say nx generate library, and then let's call it anti-pattern. Example. Cool. So reactive programming is really important. Is because if you don't do it right, it will actually harm your code base big time, and you will not even know what happens because an idea is it might create the memory leaks in your application. So memory leaks is a problem that your browser is having a resource taken in the computational power and in the memory, and then eventually it will actually start to add up. So the longer users use your app, the longer it will become visible, and then eventually your whole app will stop down or slow down or even crash on your users. So this is a big problem. So you want to keep an eye on your memory leaks. Obviously, there are ways to do it in the browser. We can have a look. But generally, let me explain a situation called a reactive programming and imperative programming. So there are two paradigms. And in Angular generally is considered, imperative programming is considered not the optimal way. You shouldn't code this way. So let's just give it a component and let's call it reactive component. Oh, here we go. So I've created a reactive component. So here we are. So obviously I always want to get some data, right? Output. So this is my component, super basic stuff. Ideally I would have something from a service or something like this. So I could show it here. But let's just use a service example. It's always good practice to extract your business logic and you're like fetching the logic out of your component. Keep your component small in general, but then I'm gonna have like data service. That doesn't matter what it is. So in order to get it done, of course, I have to have that injectable set up. Data service, and here I would have like client, HTTP client, maybe GraphQL, Apollo, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. What I can do is to create a public, or actually I can create a getter. So let's say I say get all data, and then as every service I should return an observable, and then I'm going to return an observable of string array. It's not really important what's here. And then in here, I'm going to use the of operator just to return an observable. And then I'm just going to return a list of strings. Cool. So now I need to plug it in my component. So I import my data service. And then let's just have a look at what we could be doing. So one way to go about it is the imperative way. You can spot it. So when I look at the code and I do a lot of code reviews, I look at it and I say, I can already spot it. I don't know what's exactly wrong, and there could be a longer discussion about why this is it, but I can definitely spot a pattern and say, hey, this is not optimal. So let's say I want to have a vowels. V for vowels. And then it's going to be observable of string array as well. But obviously, I want to only have things like A, B, C, and stuff. So in this case, I have only one vowel. Let's just not go too much into the detail. But how reactive programming looks like. So, oh, sorry, it wouldn't be a observable. It would be already a, sorry, like that. Cool. So how can I already spot it's not going to be a reactive programming? Well, first of all, a normal reactive programming would start with something assigned to it. That's a big difference. In this case, I don't do it. I go direct to the service. I get all the data. Then obviously it's observable, so I need to subscribe to it. And here I get the data. And then inside of my subscribe, I would set my variable. This v equals, and then I want to filter data, or maybe we can call it A. So only A, I want to filter only A, data filter, and then char. Cool. You see, this is imperative programming. Why? Because you imperatively say what's happening, and it's pretty sequential. So first you do the call, and then you subscribe, and then you sign things. And then when you go to your template and you want to output it, now let's just keep it as a list, for example. Use the ng4 for it. Let car of A. That's it. Yeah. So let's have a look how it's actually done. Oh yeah, and I have to make sure it's exported. And then inside the apps, I want to just output it. So I want to make sure my reactive, anti-pattern module example is included. And then all I have to do is put it here. Reactive. Cool. Obviously, you know what's going to happen. It should output the A's, but there will be some interesting twist to it. Let me show it to you. So here we go. We got the A, right? Everything's so good. And you see, it is an anti-pattern. And then you can come to me and say, hey, but it works, right? So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that describing, that's very important, because if that module, if that component hangs in for too long and it makes those calls too many times, it starts leaking the memory. Another thing is it might stop working. Obviously, it depends on the size of the data you have, but as soon as you use change detection on push strategy, which is a recommended way, obviously, this is a very basic example and it should work, but if you start adding some more complicated structures, not only strings, the change detection can actually fail. It can actually look and say, hey, I don't think anything changed, but yes, it did change. So when you start doing like, you know, I click that and hide it and show it, this will cause an error, because, you know, it's not an observable, you don't subscribe to it, your template doesn't know about what has changed. So you shouldn't do it. Let me actually see, because I always wondered where is the moment when things will stop actually blowing. But trust me, when you start adding more complex data structures and, you know, it's not as simple as this is, suddenly you will realize things don't work. And then you will scratch your head and think, what is the thing? Then what you do, you go to the Stack Overflow and you start Googling this thing. And the first thing you see, people tell you to do the change detector reference. That's a bad thing, actually. You shouldn't do it, because what you do here, you show me you don't understand how the detection change mechanism. So it's either of two ways. Either you're really, really good and you know what you're doing, because you want to maybe run things outside zone, or maybe you have a zoneless application and you really know what you're doing, or you don't know what you're doing. And that's usually the case when I see the code like this. Then I say, okay, you don't know what you're doing. Because what's happening here very often, obviously it's more complex than that, you will actually start forcing change detection on this. And it leads to a lot of other trouble. So that's really not recommended. Again, you have to trust me on this. I've been the done that, got a t-shirt. Cool. So that's one. So what should you do in this case? Well, we have a rule, for example, that if I'm in a smart component, and I am in a smart component because I don't have any inputs and I don't have any, I have a service injected, that means it's a smart component. And I don't have any content projection because it's a smart component, then we always use observable. So the good way to go about it would be to have observable here. And obviously you want to use the finish notation. And now this doesn't make any sense, because you can't just assign things like this because it's reactive. It's not imperative. But don't worry, it's actually very simple. All you have to do is to do like this. Start with the observable first. Obviously, there is a subscribe part. You don't want to have, you want to get rid of this, because you want to make sure things get, you know, subscribed and unsubscribed for you in the template. So you should use async pipe for this. And here, in order to do the filter, what you can do is to use pipeable operator. You can use map. and copy that code. Boom. That's all you have to do. It's really literally a couple of lines of code, but it makes a big difference. There's also a lot of things with RxJS, and it's very popular in RxJava. The idea is also that every of this pipeable operator will wait until you actually get the resources in your browser to process it. So it's also pretty cool. So all we have to do now, obviously, this is observable. As I already said, use a sync pipe. You don't have to worry about unsubscribing. And that's really it. Let's have a look. The result is the same, but it's a lot different code. So I hope that's clear. Do you guys have any questions to this?
So far, so good. Anyone has a question?
Cool. You can always ask questions at the end. Okay, awesome. Let's move to the next one. So once I figured it out, you know, how to do the service, the next thing is, this is a smart component, right? But there is another anti-pattern, which is it's also very funny, actually, but it's really a big deal, which is a hybrid component. So a hybrid component is, so you look at this and you think, oh, this is great. This is a smart component, right? It's super clean. I have my data and stuff. And then eventually someone will come in and do the input here. And then you just say, you know, maybe you want to use it to filter on a car, right? So you can have car here, which is a string. And then in here, you want to say this car. You might want to do it because from the position of this component here, maybe you want to pass on information how you actually want to do it. And you might be, for example, using B, right? So now I want to filter only for Bs. Here we go, I get the B. So you might think about it and say, hey, this is great, you know? Hey, I have my inputs, I can configure things, and then I can have my, you know, components fetch the data. Well, it's not really great, to be honest, because configuration like this or passing things like this, you break the rules about separation of concerns. So there is a saying that, you know, you have a smart components and presentation components. These are two different things, and you should keep it like this, because right now I have a hybrid. I have both. I have inputs, which represents presentational component, and then I have services. It's not really good because it's usually not flexible. Usually you just solve the problem at hand, and then eventually someone will come in and say, hey, I want to change the rules, change the logic, and use it somewhere else, and then you realize your component is not reusable. So this component is not reusable. So an idea is like this. I give you an example. Let's say I have my service, right? Data service. And let's say I would create something exactly the same. I'm just gonna out service, something different. I mean, it's still gonna return a strings and it's still gonna return the data and stuff like this, but maybe it's slightly different. Maybe it provides me with different data. Maybe it has double B's or something like this. And maybe the method is different. Get B's. Okay, now I tell you, hey, can you use this service? Oh yeah, this is out service. Can you use this service for the same component? I mean, it's exactly the same, just use another service and stuff like this. And then you come here and you can't really, look, it's closed. So you actually break solid principles as well, because one of them is open closed, which means it should be open for extension, closed for modification. Right now, it's pretty much closed. You can't do much about it. So what people do, they go ahead and create another component which looks just like this. because even though you might in your module you might provide different data service, but they have a different interface, so you cannot really do it without affecting code here. And then you have this, you know, great piece of template. Obviously, it's a lot more advanced in real life than this, and then you cannot reuse it. So you start having problems with that. So what you should do instead is to change that into different components. One will be smart component, including that service, and the other one will be the presentational components. Let me show you how it could be done. So we need to create a new component, presentational only, and let's call it a list. Cool. Oh, I made it inside of this one. Forgive me. Okay, and here I would like to have that logic with the input. I will not have any constructor for now. Actually, sorry, not the car. I would like to get the items, which is a string array. And then in my template, I would like to have this one, but instead of this, I want to have my items. Then let's call it item. So it's just a list. So now I have my presentational list somewhere, and then I have my data related stuff here. So what I can do is, what I can do is to have one component for the A. I don't want to use this one. I want to use my list. I believe it's this one. And then I need to provide the items. And items are my async pipe. So that's pretty cool, because now if I want to create another alternative reactive component, I can do the same and reuse the same component in that template. Obviously, you can ask, why would I create another component for the same sort of purpose? Well, yeah, of course, this is just an example. The real life would look, you have some headers and you have some other UI components here. And only this one might be the reusable part, right? So I hope you see the picture here. Generally, if you look at the code, just think about it this way. If I have a component that has inputs and services injected, I mean like a data services, and I have all these, you know, observables, it's a hybrid component. You should split that into two, because then you gain higher reusability. So then you want to reuse your presentational layer, and then you want to, you know, change your container kind of, you know, data fetching part. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, that leads me to another anti-pattern, which is people tend to create list components, or generally presentational components, exactly like this. So 99% of the time when people apply for our job, they will have something like that. So I say, hey, create a list for me. And then they will go ahead, create a component, and then they will have a very empty class, no logic at all, just one input. And then all the logic will be in the template. That's also an anti-pattern. Why? Because you are creating template components. So you think about your components in terms of templates, not in terms of reusability. Let me show you an example. An example could be So let's not reuse this component in our reactive component. So let's not worry so much about the data. Generally, I can create two observables. This is going to be the B. Let me just show it to you. Oops, sorry. Okay, and then the B will be exactly the same as A. It's just that we're going to filter on B. Obviously, I can create another function for it and whatnot. Cool. But let's just keep it super simple now. So I go here, and then I would like to create a new list, right? So I create a new list on the B. And then the business comes in, and they see, okay, I have one list for A, one list for B. Great. You know what? I like this other list B, but what I would like you to do is to add an extra button next to it, just a button, right? Okay. So what would typical developer do? Well, he would think hard and he would say, okay, let's add the button and it needs to look like this. And then just say click me or whatever. Cool. You see, let's have a look. But now both lists have button, right? I would like to have it only one place. So typically what people will do, they will put an ngIf. And yes, you can guess it's not a good way. So ngIf has button or something like this, right? Now, okay, how do I define the has button? Well, the easiest thing is to do another input. Oh, sorry, it's a Boolean. And if you look at the Uncle Bob session, I really believe in Uncle Bob big time. I mean, he's changed my life as a developer. You see, sure, you can solve that problem by having has button. You can bind it as well. Yes. And then to create that, and it's equals to true. See, that will work. Now it's great. But the problem is a couple of things. According to Uncle Bob and what I also believe in, first of all, it's a Boolean flag. Boolean flags are usually not good. It's because it makes your code now. So think about it this way. Whenever you create an if statement in your template or in your code, you actually create complexity. Complexity is not good because more complex structures tend to be higher cognitive load and really difficult to understand for the reader. So if I come in and start seeing multiple ngIf, and this is a simple example, I saw switch statement with ifs and a single template like this could be like nested, right? You could have another list and then another list. This will be different variables. And you can see like, oh my, what's happening here, right? Like what was the intention? And you start like guessing, maybe this is false, this should be true. There is no documentation and stuff. Ideally, I would believe your code should be so clean that you don't need to write any documentation. But remember, whenever you add if, you create complexity. Then you do one more thing bad to your code base. Another thing is you need to now cover two test cases, one with if and one with another if. And this gives me the two variants, right? One with if and one with another. Let's give it another button with another if, and then it's gonna be has color button or whatever. How many variants do I have now? Well, one with 0 buttons, one with all the buttons, that's 2, one with only this button and with that button, so it's 4. You add one more button and you know what's happening, right? So you're adding a lot of complexity, unnecessary complexity. You should not do it. So what can you do? Well, you can do many things actually, but there is one really good way to go about it, and it's called content projection. But before we go to content projection, I wanted to show you another issue that is very often caused by this anti-pattern of template presentational layer. So let's just forget a little bit about the ng-if. Let's just say this is a template. This is how it should be. But what I need you to do is to add a click handler. And then when you click, you want to notify that in your upper component, like in your top component, right? So what can you do? Well, what you can do is you can create a handler and on clicked, and then here you're in the presentational component. So you don't have a state, you don't have a service, you don't have access to it, because if I create a constructor with my data service, well, that's gonna be a hybrid component, right? So you cannot do it. So what people do, they do the output. So output is pretty cool, and it's how you should code things. But in here, you will have a new event emitter. Cool. I believe it doesn't have. All right, anyway. And here you want to emit this, right? So you want to say click, emit. Now, you didn't. So this is a very basic example, and this is not breaking any rules for now. But imagine a list component is part of another component, maybe a grid or maybe a layout component, which is also presentational. So what's happening is you will actually end up having emitting the event that will go to another service and emit the event there as well. And that's not good, because it's called event bubbling. You shouldn't do it, because very easily someone in between, first of all, you're pushing a lot of data that is not a concern of the parent component. Second of all, you start adding a lot of logic just in order to push this event higher. Yeah, sure, you can use UI service in between those components, and it's very often used in some cases, but you have to be careful that it's UI component, not the data component. Sorry, it's UI service, not the data service. So it's easy to get it wrong, and it's not good. The event bubbling breaks things very easily for you. So what can you do? Well, as I already told you, you should use a content projection. So remove all this, move here, and all you want to do is to have an ng content. This is awesome. So now you want to remove this part. Reactive component, sorry. Yeah, in here, we don't have that input anymore, so it's cleaner. It's like one less thing to worry about, and then you can just put things like this. And then technically, you don't need to pass on this data, because you can just use it in a for loop yourself. And then you can have, in one case, you might decide to have a button, and in the other case, here. And look, I'm in a smart component, right? I already have data to the service. Imagine this data service would have things like send data, and then that would make all the calls to the backend. But generally, sure, I mean, you can just do the void, and yeah, you know the drill. You know what happened. I mean, you've built it many times. So in here, what you can do is to say service and data, bang. And you see, you don't bubble an event because you have direct access to it. So now you gain a huge flexibility. Now you really can do whatever you want. Imagine that component as I created before. For now, it was only the button, but imagine, I don't know, maybe I want to add extra thing. Maybe I want to say, I don't know, maybe a link, with the router link somewhere, and that's one variant. And then maybe I want to use another one. Actually, we can use the normal But you get my point. I mean, yeah, you have to include the router margin. Okay, but you see, in the other case, this Angular list would have to have a lot of things. So now, question for $100. How do you spot that pattern? Well, first of all, you look at the name. The name says list. Whenever it says list, button, whenever it says things like item, list item, whenever it says like accordion, whenever it says like card, you know, something that is represented in the UI, like a UI only, then it should be presentational component. And then you look if there is anything in between opening and a closing tag. If there is not, probably something is not right. Because if you look at the HTML element, div, I mean, very rarely you see something like this, like an empty div. Usually a div would contain something. The same is here. Every presentational component should contain something, and you do it for ng content. When you look at the UL, I mean, very rarely you just see this. Every UL has a li, you know? Or when you look, this is a natural way how HTML is structured. It's actually part of the format. So you should also do it here. So we have A, let me see what I did wrong. Oh yeah, the router. Okay, sorry. Let me just remove it. Where was the router? Sorry. Oh, I think I missed this router somewhere when I imported it. Oh no, now it's just fine. Cool. So you see, it's now it's reusable. Now it's extensible. Obviously, this example is super basic. I mean, it's just a list. I wouldn't create a component just for it, but you know, this logic can go very easily. You know, a lot more advanced. You know, the list can have some, I don't know, styling or whatever. It can have some logic of what element did I actually click and what was selected and whatnot. But technically, I can give you a pro tip. Don't build the presentational components yourself. I mean, style them, but I would just go with Angular material, because 99% of the situation it already has what I need. And everything more complex than Angular material is usually not just a presentational component. It's usually some sort of a container or just a piece of HTML. And trust me, there is nothing bad about copying, because a lot of people will say, hey, but you know, it doesn't look very good because when I have a component like this, look how nice it is. I just copy these 2 lines of code, 1 line really. And I say, yes, you do, but until the new requirement comes in with the button, then you have to start understanding the API of this one and have some Boolean flags and whatnot, and it actually leads to a lot of trouble. It leads to more trouble than it is, and that doesn't even look natural, like HTML style. So this is flexible and reusable, and this is why we create presentation components, so we can reuse them, not because they are easy to copy. And this is as easy to copy as the other case, just copy it. It's a little bit more lines, but you know, it's not such a big deal. If you gain the flexibility, it's much better. Does it make any sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let me just check my list real quick. If I have missed something. So we have an event bubbling. We talked about hybrid components. Imperative, input-driven components, the one when you actually put an input as a part of the, when you put the data through an input and then just like sort of let it explode inside. Oh, I can give you one more. This one is advanced though. So my question is like, who's not really impressed by what has happened for now? because then I can give you like really, really cool stuff. All right, I'm gonna give you another one.
Yeah.
Cool stuff is
I'm
always
personally good
welcome.
with it.
Cool. Okay, I'll give you cool stuff. So this is you see, what we do right now is Angular, pure Angular thing, right? That you can read in the Tour of Heroes. And another thing to reuse pieces of UI is to use directives and try to understand these things. Obviously, it's all helpful, but it's still sort of like quote, just Angular, right? The next level is to create clean architecture. An idea is with clean architecture is you want to move away from Angular and focus on TypeScript only classes. That way you gain flexibility and it's easier to update your Angular apps and do a lot of stuff like this. But generally, it also helps you to maintain your business logic. So here comes the cool stuff. So one way to do services. So let's just say this is not just a data. Just a second. Okay, so you normally wouldn't return strings, right? You would have actually some data. Let's get an example. Product. Okay, product. What is product? Well, product, 99% of the people will write like this, interface. It's an interface. And it's cool, it's good if it's small, but eventually you will start having some business rules where you're gonna fail. So check it out. Okay, maybe for here we're just gonna keep strings. Let me create a new function. So I'm gonna say create product. Okay, and here I need to send the product. So I would have a product of type product, and then I would send it to the backend, right? Now the problem is the backend comes in and they say, you know what? I need you to validate your product before. I need you to make sure that the money you're sending me is not negative, right? So, or it could be maybe negative is pretty straightforward because you can create a phone validator for this. But what people can go and say, I want you to not send me a product that is, I don't know, not older than 2 days or something like this. So you will have a publish date, published at, or something like this, and that would be a date, or it could be a string of a date, doesn't matter. And then you see, you might have a string with the numbers and so on. And then obviously you might have a price. So you see, this is interfacing your domain model. And this is okay. I mean, in most of the cases, it's simple, but as soon as someone comes in and starts giving you some rules, 99% of the people will create those rules either in your services or inside the components. That's not a good place because you're not doing the clean architecture. You want to create them inside of your classes. So what you really need to worry about is to create a class. This is a proper modeling. So interfaces are great to start, but with more complex rules, you will need to start creating classes. This is where a lot of people struggle. They just don't get the concept. And it's pretty powerful. So what can you do with the modeling of this? So this is like object-oriented programming one-on-one, and it's touching upon things like domain-driven design. We might talk about it one day, but look at it. Price is a string. Well, probably it's not a string. And if you ever work in any e-commerce project, you will know that price is actually pretty interesting concept. Because what if something costs $9.99? Well, you might have a number. Let me create that for you. So let's just don't worry about it for now. So let me create a product, and the product is of type product. And then what I want, well, I want to have an ID, it's one. I want to have a published ad. I can maybe skip the published ad for now because it's not so important. And then I have a 99.99. Well, you see, one day, if you do like this, you're gonna be very bad place, because there is a thing like arithmetic overflow. I've seen it many times. People who use floats for monetary values end up in a bad place, end up miscalculating things. Computers are a very funny thing, and they actually, if you use floats and you start multiplying them, this number is represented with something more like this, and there is a 19 on the end. You don't see it normally, but it's really how it's represented. And then when you multiply it enough times, that 9 makes a difference on the cents, and suddenly you start charging people $10 instead of $9.99. Oh, you know, whatever variation of it. But generally, there is a miscalculation. So when you do the price, you should always use cent values. So actually, $9.99 is 999. That's how it should be done. So this is another anti-pattern I see when people actually code. They create monetary values as a float numbers, and they should use in cents values. I hope it makes sense. Have you guys ever had a problem like this?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe you can repeat that again.
Yeah. So if I have a lot of data, right? I have money. I have money involved. So what I want to do is, if I have money, I have so many ways to represent price, like a money, right? Obviously, I can use string. That's easy because, hey, that will look more like this, right? It's a nicely formatted money. But this is usually useless for me because it's just a string. It doesn't have any value. If I want to add or do the sum or total or whatever, I will start having problems. Because, you know, I have to convert that, remove the dollar and stuff like this. So this is not the proper way to model it. So another way people actually do it, they use the float numbers, right? Sorry. So they turn that into the number, and then they do 9.99. This is not good, because when you have a lot of data and you do the sum and maybe do some VAT calculations on top, you eventually, one time when you start summing up things, you will realize that when you multiply it, it will actually turn into 10. Because there is a concept called arithmetic overflow, and this is how computers store the numbers. So the key takeaway from this is, do not ever use floats for your monetary values, like something represents money. Always take the value and multiply by 100. So you do the value in cents. So if I want to have $9.99, it's going to be 999 cents. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So always use this value. And therefore, you want to store this in your memory of your computer or in the browser. You want to store it as a values which is unsigned numbers. And then eventually, maybe someone, what happens in some systems when you do -10? In some systems, if you're not careful, it will actually add the money to your bank account. So you shouldn't do it. You want to actually validate it inside your domain model. And now it's a class, so you can do it, that this is not allowed. So what I would like to do here is to throw error. Okay, how can I do it? Well, one and simple way is to check here. So I can say if this price is smaller than 0, then throw error. money must be positive. Okay, cool. This is, I think I have a typo. Incorrect money. Cool. All right. But that's also not the good way, because you violate the principles of encapsulation of your module. So look at this. Now, if I wanna, this is a product, right? But maybe I'm gonna have something called an offer. An offer is similar. I'm gonna have ID and the price, and you see, it's copy paste. Don't repeat yourself. I repeated the code just to have these pieces of information. So what I should do instead is to create new class for the price. Constructor, and it's called value object. It's pretty powerful concept. Value in cents number. And then I want to have this logic here. Cool. And now, instead of using the number, I can use the type of price, and I don't have to worry about it because this piece of code is no longer relevant. I have it in a reusable place. You see? So I have a price, and I can use it now in the product and in the offer. And obviously, I would have more things. I would have a start date and so on. So how do you actually create it? Well, here I cannot put the number, but what I can do is to put new price. Now the price will throw an error, therefore whole function will throw an error. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So this is something called a value object, and in order to get there, you need to have some business rules. And then the good way is as soon as, oh, and another cool thing, maybe you know, maybe it's a valid number, and now you want to console log the value, right? So you want to say product.price, and now you want to say formatted value. Well, I don't have that function, but that's no problem, because what I can do is I can move here. Obviously, this is private, so I can have a getter for it. Oh, sorry, I can name it the same. Yeah, so I can use underscore for this. I do it because I don't want people to change my price. And then inside the price, I can have another getter, formatted value, and that can be a string. And now I can use a great thing like dollars and put this value in sets divided by 100. And it's encapsulated in the price. Now, I don't have to explain anyone that value needs to be in cents and stuff like this. And just, you know, I can just say, hey, there is a class called price, use it whenever you represent the money. And that will be automatically formatted into the dollars and divided by 100. So I don't have to repeat that functionality all over the place. So that's pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah. And with that being said, I hope you learned something new today. I gave a little bit of extra, but please, guys, if you have any questions, please do ask.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, also, please, guys, if you have any questions, please ask. I think my first question would be, so when do you choose to either go for class or interface?
Yeah, I usually start with an interface because it's easy. But there are two cases, or a couple of cases, where you start needing, when you start to need a class. One of it is rules, like a business rules, like the validation, the price has to be, you know, positive, or the date cannot be in the past, or it has to be a UID. Then obviously you cannot go with the interface. because you would have to do the mapper around it, and that doesn't make much sense. So then you start benefiting from this. Another case is when you actually want to reuse it, and when you reuse it, you have, so when I have it only in one place, like in my single service, that's okay because I just map it in that service. But as soon as I need it in two different places, and I might have some more sophisticated logic to actually construct that object, maybe, you know, have some static constructor, we can talk about it somewhere in the future. But generally, if I need to construct it in more advanced way, then the class again plays very nicely. And lastly, when I need to format the data for the UI. So you know, like the getters I showed you, you know, like I don't want to have that in my components because that's not reusable. Class is reusable.
Okay. And when it comes to content projection, right? Like what if or you have of course, let's say for example it's in a card, right? A card component, right? Is there like a limit to the number of lines of code you could use when it comes to content projection? And by that I mean like of course in the presentational component, right? You just put whatever you want to put over there and then like put ng content in its corresponding template, right? So what if you have like a lot or many lines of particular template?
Yeah.
Like would it look ugly, or would you still go with the same way you do it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So cards are usually more sophisticated pieces of templates, right? Because they might have some headers, titles, buttons, and whatnot. So actually, what I really would recommend is you focus on the card only. So it should be only the card. And then what you can do, you can use the slots in your ng content. You know, you can have multiple ng contents. Maybe I can show it to you. Actually, you know what? I show you the best if I show you on an example from Angular Material, because whenever in doubt, go to Angular Material. Let me, but it's a very good topic. So if we go to Angular components, I have some drag and drop thing. All right, that's cool. And now let me move to SRC, material, and then you have a card. And let's look how they do it. So in the template, you see, it's pretty straightforward. You actually have an ng content. And then you have something called a slot. Here, the slot makes sure things get rendered in the right order or in the right place in your template, right? So actually, you see, you have two ng contents, but one is specially reserved for an element that has a tag mat card footer. But yeah, you literally have a big ng content be inside. You just let the people do. But now it doesn't matter if, so it doesn't mean that what is inside is not another presentational component with another ng content, right? It's pretty normal to actually contain multiple, stack them all around.
Okay, cool. So that means, for example, if in this particular card.html, let's say you had 100 lines of code, right? And then let's say the footer was about the last 20, right? So when it comes to you putting it in terms of content projection, you still put all those 100 lines of code inside the smart component containing these presentational components.
Yeah, so it sounds counterintuitive for people, but yes, you would do it. It's because what you want to get templating, or you want to get reusability, right? 100 lines of code, it's a lot, I do agree, but it's, you know, it takes only one of these lines from 100 to change, and you're already locked. You have to create another component.
Okay.
You know, you might have 10 different versions of this card, and just having this because, oh, it's so nice, I just reuse it, you know? You know, it doesn't benefit in the long run. I know it's counterintuitive, I know, but it really makes sense.
Okay. Probably the last question that I have is, so for example, now in your presentational component, right? And let's say you still have your ng on in it, but then it's empty. By leaving it empty, like, does it have repercussions when it comes to, let's say, running your Angular application, or it is advisable to delete it because it has some, I don't know, some side effects?
I don't think it has a side effect. It's more like visual thing. Why would you have an empty function, right? So I would remove it, because if you don't have it, and one argument can be, yeah, but maybe one day you will need it. Yeah, but it's 2 lines of code. Implements on init and ng on init, right? Just remove it.
Yeah.
I don't think you need it. If you need it, use it. If you don't write.
Okay. Anyone else has a question? Can ask.
All right. Well, but then thank you very much.
Okay. If anyone doesn't have a question, yeah, I'd like to say thank you to Greg for taking us through this session. By the way, Greg has amazing content also on his YouTube channel, where he talks about some of like the best practices with building Angular applications. Personally, I've learned a lot from his YouTube channel because I think after even learning whatever he's teaching on the YouTube channel, makes me even be very, very cautious of how I even architect my Angular application. Yes, at some point, it feels like, oh my God, am I doing something wrong or anything? But it really, really helps, like even trying to understand like what exactly are you building. And for example, is this a project that you are probably, let's say in 5 years time, you're going to add something onto it? Does that mean I'll have to come back and change everything? Or it's just a bit of moving things here and there? And yeah, even like working on my side projects, I've really, really learned a lot on, especially when it comes to reusability, because now I find myself like I don't really have to write the same thing over and over again. And for example, like learning about content projection has really helped me, whereby like if I have like I don't know, 3 different routes, I mean, or 3 different modules that probably require the same thing. Let's say it's a list of cards. I don't really have to put, let's say, I don't know, postcard and then let's say message card. I can just use one card and then use content projection to just change whatever I want to change, which is pretty amazing in my opinion. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, so if you want to learn more about what Greg does, you can definitely check out his YouTube channel. Yeah, Alex, you had something to say?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Mine is thank you for that. It was quite informative, and we learned a thing or two. Maybe the other thing I would also like to ask, maybe in the near future, we can you can maybe take us through something like a factory, using factories, like whereby you can have a token that is a common token that is passed around. Like let's say you have what can I say? Like maybe you have a user token which is being passed around, and you use the factory pattern to be able to you inject it into a module and you're able to pass it around. So something like that. I'm thinking around that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, because I encountered that in some work I was doing, and I managed to get it working, but the principle has not sunk in completely. So it would be good to have something like that again. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. When just gather that and let me know. We can even make one session just for stuff like this that you described, and then have more things. And also what you said on the beginning, looking 5 years ahead and stuff like this. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Greg, for taking the time. And as usual, the video will be available on our YouTube channel by tomorrow afternoon. So yeah, definitely check out our YouTube channel for some of this content that we upload. It will be really, really beneficial to you. As someone, for example, who wants to continue improving their Angular skills. Yeah, Greg, do you have anything to just as a parting shot?
No, guys. I mean, thank you for coming again. I really think you guys, are the future of Angular in Kenya, and it's really important to keep coming, keep learning. Time passes by very shows that you're more than 90% of other developers because you actually strive for development, for getting better. So keep it going. No matter how much years of experience you have, I still learn myself. So this hunger for learning is very important. And I believe, and me and Minko, sorry, the guy from Google as well, we agree that this is the most important thing when it comes to be a successful developer.
Totally agree with that. Yeah, thank you again, Greg, and thank you all for coming. Yeah, I'd like to say have a good evening to every one of you.
You too. Bye bye.